Hey guys, I want to talk with you guys just a bit about measuring your shooting ability. There are a lot of ways to do it. Some can be very round or ammunition intensive and some less so. But I find that one of the things that may be helpful for a lot of shooters is to see how their shooting stacks up to, say, a police qualification course of fire. And the good news is that the most police qualification courses of fire are pretty readily available. Like you can find them online. They are public knowledge. In Virginia, there are a lot of them, at least a double handful, that are approved courses of fire. And one of them that I find to be in pretty common use is the Virginia Tactical, Tactical Qualification Course 1. If you're curious, it's Appendix F in the DCJS manual for weapons requirements, and I'll put a link in the description for it. But that is 50 rounds shot from 5 yards all the way back to 25 yards. And it encompasses drawing from the holster, changing positions, switching from strong hand only to support hand only. So I think that it's a pretty good overall measure of shooting. The maximum you can score on it is 100 points. But I will say that if you get to the point where you're shooting very well, then shooting it again and again doesn't really help you. It burns up ammo, but once you can shoot 100 repeatedly, then shooting 100 on it again doesn't really help you. But more on that in a second. So I know that a lot of high-end shooters, competition shooters, guys who shoot on the regular, often make claims, well, I can shoot better than cops. And it's a pretty broad statement. I know a lot of police officers who struggle with their speed and accuracy. I know a lot of police officers who are very good shooters. So it is kind of back and forth. More on that in a second. I shot the course that I just mentioned last week on a lunch break when I was playing around. And a full-size Q target is pretty big. If you've ever seen the FBI qualification target, and it lets you shoot on the B-27 and a couple of others. And all those targets, like I said, they're really, really big. So shooting on targets that big can certainly encourage sloppiness. If you are shooting on a target that big and you're finding that you're knocking out 99s and 100s every time, then it's time to do something different. So usually the only times I shoot on a full-size target are when I am forced to for qualification. Show up at my agency, hey, you got to shoot on a full-size target. That's okay. But for my own personal practice, I spend most of that time shooting at much smaller targets, which I've talked about before, B8 bullseyes, 3x5 cards, or printed targets that have smaller scoring zones on them. Those are much better for you. Your typical police qualification course of fire, I think Tom Givens referred to it as a sobriety test with a gun. And I think for anybody who's got a reasonable amount of experience under their belt when it comes to shooting a qual course, that's probably true. But if you don't have that level of experience, shooting one just to see where you're at is probably not a bad idea. You know, if you've got a 25-yard range and you can either do turning targets or you can use your own timer, putting yourself on one of those courses of fire just to see how you score, it's useful. You know, it is a data point, not all the data points when it comes to your shooting, but certainly one of them. The Virginia courses of fire only require a 70% to pass. And you could argue that the 70% that they enforce may be not even really 70%, because if you put hits anywhere on that cardboard, even if it's not in the scoring zone, they give you partial credit, basically 60% of a full value hit. And so, yeah, I will certainly say I do believe that course of fire is relatively easy for most people to pass. It gets harder if you want to enforce 100% hits in the bottle or the scoring zone. It gets a little harder. If you want to say, if we're not scoring at least 90 or 95 or 100, harder still. Harder for you, it depends. I don't know where you're at shooting-wise. But if you found all that to be true, like, hey, I can shoot 100 on that, on command, on demand, not a problem. So that's just silly. You can modify it. Shoot the whole thing on a smaller target. Increase the distance. Reduce the amount of time you have to shoot each string of fire, or up the round count. There are a lot of ways to make something more difficult. And I think that once your skills hit a certain point, then it really behooves you to test yourself in that regard and try to push things. So as an example, This past week on my lunch break, when I shot the 50 TQC or Tactical Qualification Course 1, I shot the entire thing on a 3x5 card. And the scoring was simple. If it was on the 3x5 card, it was full value. And if it was not on the card, it was worth 0 points. That was considerably more challenging. I'll show you, I'll fold in some of the video and I'll show you my target at the end, 74% if we're counting hits on that card. So while that is passing, it is not a brilliant score, but like I said, I'm holding myself to a much smaller scoring zone. And if you're saying, well, that's you, Jay, you know, a lot of cops can't do that. Went back, like some of my colleagues showed up, lunch break wasn't over, and we all shot it again. And the lowest score on that second iteration was in the mid to high 60s, with others scoring up in the 70s. So some of those guys can really shoot. Like I said, I'm not saying all can, but there are some cops out there who can. Anyway, I'll give you the kind of the easy breakdown of how to shoot the 50-round course of fire if you're curious. You could read the appendix, but the language is difficult, I think, to discern. So I'll roll in some titles, kind of show you like how I shoot it and how it's shot around here. And like I said, there are multiple targets you can use. The FBIQ is the easiest, but if you feel like challenging yourself, definitely go smaller. Recommend that. I hope that's been helpful to you. I do like to show people, kind of peel back a little bit, like what cops do. I don't think there's any great mystery to it. You can certainly look online and see what police training looks like. I have my own thoughts on the current state of police training. In some cases, it's honestly better than you would think, and in some cases, it still needs some work, but that's my own personal opinion. Anyway, guys, I hope this has been entertaining and fun, and maybe gives you something to go out and play with the next time you hit the range. It's 50 rounds. You can put it on target and see what your numbers look like. If you do that, let me know. I'm very curious. And if 100 is really easy on a full-size one, try the 3x5 card. Come back and let me know how you did there. Anyways, guys, take care. Stay safe.
Get him, Jay.